Everybody came from Farnham like it was their number one playground. Let's be honest, we were very lucky that way. And like, I can recall going there as a boy, as a teenager, as an adult. It always gave you a wee bit of inspiration or something about the place, you know.
Yeah.
But particularly for me in later life, when I started looking at a bit of history of my family and discovered a few things, but particularly Mrs. Callan and her connection with it, like, you know, it was that wee bit extra then, the fact that she was the caretaker in the place, and her son had died for Ireland and all the rest of it. She told me about that sort of stuff, like when my aunt looked after her, you know. And I was just looking up a few bits and pieces today about her role, like, there, and what became of it and how she got involved a bit. But funny enough, the first caretaker in the castle was actually Tom Gernan's grandfather.
Wow.
And Tom now would have, like, used it with the beginning of Dundalk North then on the Facebook pages. He would have put up photographs on that of his grandfather. Now, it was either his grandfather or his great grandfather, one or the other. And he was the first caretaker there when it started. Like, the archaeological people took her over as a museum.
It wasn't there very long, was it?
Well, it was. I looked at 1909. I think Redmond McGrath and Backhouse, the business people, they were the ones kind of that got that development going. Redmond McGrath was definitely mentioned in anything you ever read about it, like, you know. That 1920 was burned on a few occasions, but it's a good question, Tara. Like, I don't know how long. Like, it's something I should have looked at. You know, like.
Oh well, I don't expect you to know.
No, but it's, you know, when you are sort of, you know, you look at it and you, that's funny. It's a good question in the sense, like, how long did it stay? Like, it wasn't totally burned down or anything like that. Yeah, but no, there's good history to it that way, certainly for us young fellas. Like,
yeah, and you were telling me it was as a young fella that you met Mrs. Culhan and learned about her being the caretaker up there.
Well, I remember going in there as a young lad, and my auntie was looking after her. Now, Mrs. Culhan died in 1965 at 93, so I definitely remember 1959 in particular, because I was captain of the school team, and I brought in the trophy to her. And lo and behold, who's in the place that day? Only Frank Aiken. The great Frank Aiken, who would have been the commander-in-chief of the whole Downs, the IRA battalions in South Armagh Loud at that time. Fort Northern, I think that's what they called them. But I remember I said this is the Ned Bailey Cup. Oh, sure, I know Ned Bailey. The cup was he was another great man in the IRA at that time, and he gave me £0.50. So that's like how I would remember. But Mrs. Culhan, I suppose, at that time was doting. Like, I mean, I would say she died in 93 to 65. She was well into her 80s. And she said to me on a couple of occasions in the you know, I'd been there with my aunt, she would have asked me, do you play around the mount? She called it the mount. And I was 12-year-old, like, around that time, 11, 12-year-old. And she told me, like, that she lived there. And that, now she didn't talk about the fire or that night, you know, when she had to abandon the place and all the rest of it. There's a bit more, Marcus Hall, you probably know him.
I do.
He wrote a fair bit of, like, anything that I ever picked up and was him or the newspaper, that book now is out at the minute, it gives a lot of stuff about what went on during that turbulent time around 1920-21 period. All the incidents, like, you know, what happened the night Mrs. Callan had a bail out of it. But I used to think, you know, like as a young lad, like she lived out in the castle, like, you know, and I think she was telling me, you know, she was doting sort of. But my auntie didn't know, because I remember saying it to my Auntie Breeze. I said, Mrs. Callan lived in the castle where we play. And my auntie, like, I don't ever recall her ever saying to me, oh yeah, she did, she was the caretaker. She didn't know, you know, and it was only when I started doing the ancestry on the Callans and that I discovered different things about her. And also discovered that her own brother is married to my father's aunt, oldest aunt, on the Callans, Lily. Had two sons that died in the First World War, 1916 and 1918. And Patrick Callan and these boys would have been first cousins. So you had Patrick, who died a patriot in Dundalk, and he had his first cousins who was dying in France, like, you know, so all in relation to Mrs. Callan's, like, you know, it became very interesting then, like, you know.
I'd say. And so you didn't believe her when she told you that she used to live in the castle?
No, not for a woman of her age, because I tell you, like, the castle at that stage, like, was in ruins, you know, and like, you know, you just couldn't have envisaged anybody, and you wouldn't have thought a woman like, you know, you wouldn't envisage Mrs. Callan. You'd be thinking back, and this figure here, you know, going around dressed like that, you know. I wasn't to know, like, that the thing that she was, it was turned into a museum, and that she was a living caretaker in it and that, like, you know. But
so it seemed all too much like
like
castles and dragons to you, kind of.
I never actually ever told any of my friends, like, we'd be very regular visitors up around the castle, that, oh, you know, so, you know, Mrs. Callan, like, you know, the woman my auntie looks after, she lived here. Like, you weren't going to say that, because it didn't just come in to the story. Like, as far as we were concerned, it was Chulainn, Satanta, and I suppose for us boys, the spiritual home of the Fatima youth, because, like, when we done the Puck Fada and all of that sort of stuff, like, it was, we were carrying out what he done, Puck the ball from Dundalk into Ardwalker. That sort of thing would be in your head, like, you know.
And you just couldn't imagine Miss Callan hanging out with Chulainn.
Just couldn't envisage that a woman, like, you know, and she had her own story, like, you know, like, at the same time about the place, like, you know, and how she like had to abandon the place, and, like, I mean, her own son had died for the cause, but yet here's the IRA making her homeless, like, you know. And funny enough, I was just reading about that incident is actually 101 year on the 16th of June. It was 100 years last year. And that same night, that weekend, Eastwood's Castletown house was burned, they tried to burn it. It's the house, the castle beside the Louis Convent. That house, Eastwood's, that was him, he was the landlord. He actually owned the castle. And the shooting then of the Constable Campbell on the Neary Road, and then the two boys that was taken out of only up the street here and shot the Warriors' boys. So that was all in that 1 week in the town. A lot of incidents, like, you know, 1921.
A hard week.
It was a tough week, rough times and tough times. Difficult times, I'd say, for people, like, trying to. But Mrs. Callan, like, I never, like as I say about her, I got a half a crown off Frankie Aiken, But the fact that I went in, took the cup in to show them, and he happened to be there that day. And the name of the cup was the Ned Beatty Cup, who was a big Republican. So the cup was called after him. So he says, I know the man. That's all I remember, that man. He handed me half a crown. And a half a crown to us back then, was big money to get off anybody, But I wouldn't have known even at 12-year-olds that Frank Aiken was the big chief. And he went on then to be a minister, and he went on then to be what he was in the country. But that's basically but I would never go up and say to the boys or the Palmer lads and that, I know a woman that lived here, because it didn't fit the script, But yeah, she did say it to me, and I just, and she told me to get better someday for Ireland. But it's only in the last number of years. There was plenty talked about Thomas Mulholland, because he was actually shot in that incident in Bridge Street. Patrick Callan was the man who was the head man of that operation that night, commandant or something like that, and it was only when he went in the next day to visit Thomas Mulholland to identify him, and the RIC had lifted him and took him and gave him an awful hiding, which he died from 6 months later. He never got over that hiding. So that's how he ended up, as there was Chulainn Street and Mulholland Avenue and O'Hanlon Park, a couple of patriots we have. So it became interesting for me, and it certainly did then when we were clearing out the old pub in Hall Street, my auntie's place, and I found, my father never told me about these boys, never. And they would my father's, my father's first cousins or second cousins. There was, my aunties, they were great people for keeping in contact with a family called Yarlands in England. They lived in Liverpool. And my auntie told me everything about that we were funeral undertakers and Bridge Street Callan's undertakers, all of that. She could tell me all of that. But she never told me about the Garlands until I found, when we were clearing out the place, I found correspondence and I found photographs. Actually, one of them was a war hero. And it was strange, with this thing that was put up there recently, the war memorial, there's only one of the Garlands mentioned on it. There was two brothers, and I had photographs of them, and I looked up the English thing, because great records, but on that monument, it only mentioned Thomas Callan. I knew straight away, when I went up and took a photograph and looked at it. And when I checked the war records for those who died in that war, Irish war records of them, Peter Callan wasn't mentioned for some strange reason. And I meant to contact him one time and just give the name, because
You should do that.
Yeah, but his name wasn't. There was 3 Garlands mentioned on that war memorial plaque up there, but they are not just. Obviously, they're not just from Dundalk. They're Irish lads that died in that war. There was names on that. I don't know why it's the way it is at the minute.
Whenever you asked your auntie about Mrs. Callan, what did she say? Did you say that she knew that Mrs. Callan had been the caretaker or not?
No, she wasn't aware of anything like that, because, I'd be going in there now, Ken, on a regular basis, sort of, because I was very fond of that particular aunt that looked after her. And the way it was for us, there was 10 of us, and we were between the 2 houses. And we all didn't live in 30 Farmer Park, believe me. There was actually my oldest sister and a younger brother was reared in 25 Lindenhall Street. So we went there the older ones of us weren't taken out of De La Salle school when we had moved to Farnham, because we well on in school, sort of, you know. Well, I was 5-year-old when we moved to Falmouth, but there was older ones than me. And the strangest thing about, when I am talking about that, the two that lived with me auntie, the oldest girl, Agnes, was taken out of the convent school and went to the Hamlets. And Vincent probably started, in Falmouth school anyway. But both of them would be going out to Falmouth to school, and we'd be coming into Dundalk to school. So it was a bit crazy, a bit mad, like, you know. My sister used to like go around stories. She used to laugh at that. I used to say, we used to wave at you when you'd be going out of the bus, to say we wouldn't have the money to get the same bus back in, and you'd be going out in that bus. See, we'd be walking into town, and we'd be waving at her going out the us walking in the fucking school, like, you know. Yeah. Oh, there was Jackie, Jimmy, Eamon and myself. Yeah, there'd be 4 of us walking into school, and the bloody bus would be going out. They'd be waving at us. Bit mad, alright.
And so you basically were as much in Linnenhall Street as...
Well, we went there for our lunch and that, and we would have our time in there, you know. And they were, I have to say, they were really, they were God's people in many respects. They were very good to a lot of people. They had a tough life. The mother would have died young, and they were wealthy people at one stage in Bridge Street, a lot of businesses. But a lot of things happened, and you know, they lost business and they lost their parents young and all of that sort of stuff. It was 2 of them actually gone on to be nuns, and they had left because the mother had died when there was a baby in the house at a year old and that sort of stuff. So they reared the rest of them and that, you know. But I often wondered, like you know, it did often strike me afterwards. Not, of course, when you're 12 years of age and that, where my auntie did train as a nurse. Now, didn't work for a while to England, but I can't recall her working in any of the local hospitals or anything like that. But she wasn't. There was no such thing as a carer at that time in the 60s, like for elderly or anything like that. Just family came in and looked after whoever was ill and stuff. But I often wondered, all right, like how my auntie, like, you know, what was the connection? And then it was years later, as I said, when I was doing the ancestry, and I discovered stuff that Mrs. Culhan was actually Callan, and one of the Garlands was married to a Callan, my auntie's aunt. So that was the connection there. But Breeds never knew anything much about Mrs. Culhan, ever about her being on the. When I said it to her, I did ask her on a couple of occasions when Mrs. Culhan would say to me, you know, we up at them, she called it the Mount, up at the Mount, and I would just say, well, we play up there and all of that, and up at Holland's Castle. But like, she was well on in her life, like, you know, as I say, like, she died when she was 93. And there was, I remember her funeral actually. I wasn't actually at her funeral, but Jackie often talked about it to me before he died. He says he remembers the day of her funeral, and it was certainly, he always says, my father carried the grave, and my Uncle Jimmy and another uncle from Dublin. So she was related, like, if that was the connect, you know. But no, she certainly had. I remember aching going in and out there to see her, and but she never mentioned now the fire or anything like that. She did. She just asked about you know, were you up at the castle or up at the Mount? And there's a plaque now out on our grave. she's buried now with Patrick Callan. She's buried with him because he died in 1921. But there's a plaque on it now. Somebody has done that now. There's nobody would have known anything about Patrick Callan. There's plenty, about Thomas Mulholland you would have seen, before. But that's probably because he was actually shot on the night in Bridge Street,
Did Mrs. Callan ever mention Chulainn?
Well, no, I would say straight away Chulainn's Castle. I knew, we're up at Chulainn's Castle. It was always Chulainn's Castle to us, and that was it. We would even always was Chulainn's Castle, and that was it for us anyway. The spiritual home of we owned it. We defended it. We certainly did.
And so did Mrs. Callan, I suppose. Was she living in Linen Hall Street as well then, that time, when you knew her?
No, Mrs. Callan lived across number 21 Castletown Road, across the way from the Guard School. Do you know the red brick houses that is across? Mm. She lived there in the end house, number 21.
So she was still keeping an eye on the castle?
Yeah. But it's mad when you think of it too, that the history I discovered afterwards, that about herself, and she wasn't telling me lies when she told me she lived in it, she just said to me, I lived there, I lived that place. And I just put it down as a young lad, oh God. And my auntie couldn't tell me anything better. Because I remember asking her a couple of times. But many times you would go in there, and I'd be in there now a fair bit, I suppose. I'd go in after school and that. And to my auntie, I could be either staying in the nursery with her, or I'd be staying till she gave me the price of the halfway bus or something. But most days she'd be in there as such. But definitely the Frankie Aiken was a regular visitor, and he was I wouldn't have known anything about Frankie Aiken as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old. All I remember him is he gave me half a crown.
And he didn't mention that about Chulainn either, no? No,
there was nothing that never, as I said to her, I was always in my head, I always had that thing in my head, a wee bit about what she said to me. Maybe the woman did or something, and then as the years went on, and you got a wee bit interested in a bit of history and stuff like that. Funny enough, I started to get a wee bit of interest in that sort of stuff when there was a great librarian worked in the library, and she was a Galway woman. She was Connemara, speak Irish. Miss Foley. And any books, all those Democrats that are bound in their hard copy, and Tempest Annual, and Archaeological Society books, and all of local interest, Duffy's History of Dundalk and all of that sort of stuff. It's down to her, nobody else. Because I remember Frank McAvoy, myself, I was an apprentice, only a young lad, and we weren't learning book binding in McGowan's. It was all gone into machinery. There'd be no hand binding and anything. And Frank took on, he had a wee bindery there going, and I was very interested in book binding. And I used to go down with him, he go down to his workshop back in the house, and he took on then with binding all the Democrats. And that was all done piecemeal. When you go in, I was in there the other day now, and I was just looking at them now. They're talking actually now about taking them off the shelves, and I was disgusted. I said, my God, almighty, the work that went into them. But anyway, they were all, I don't know if you knew where the old library was. The old library was across from where the old tech was, down in Seatown. And we took them out of the loft, all those newspapers, and they all had to be out of us. We were a good few years at it. They all had to be taken down and collated and put into their ears and everything else and put together. And she done the very same then with all the Tempest annuals. She got all those hardbacked. So you'd be working on stuff like that, and you'd be start to read about, you know, like, I mean, the best, if anyone was ever to do anything in local history or anything, or find out anything, Tempest annuals are the ones, without a doubt, Tempest annuals, because they recorded everything.
I must actually go looking and see if they have anything on the mount on Chulainn's castle as well.
Yeah, there's 2 photographs there. If I was looking at them today in 1923 one of the incident with Mrs. Callan, the furniture outside. Actually, if you looked at the Loud Volunteers Facebook page, if you scroll down on that, you'd see where there's a photograph from the Tempest annuals on the mount.
And what actually happened to it? You said about the furniture outside. What actually happened? What have you deduced from what you've been looking up happened that night she was kicked out?
Well, there was plenty of other activity going on. McGuild's was burned down the night before. You often saw photographs of McGuild's. There was there was the other house, Castletown House, the one that'd be Eastwood's house beside the convent. But Marcus Howard, I was reading there, he said one time when he was talking about Patrick, like, the IRA gave him a state funeral practically, and here he was, within 9 months, our mother was homeless, with the same crowd that gave her son a kind of a state funeral. Michael Collins actually paid for that funeral of our son. I saw that where Howard had written about it. But there was a lot of activity going on, but they said that the reason that Chulainn Castle would hit was it was going to be taken over by the British. Were going to have it as just take it over as garrison or something. That's what Howard has said there in one of his writings about it, about those incidents. But yet on the same night, like, Eastwood's house, like Castletown House, was tried to be burned down. There was a lot of stuff going on at that time in Dundalk. As I say, that Campbell man, he was shot out on Dowdall's Hill. So in retaliation to that, that's how the 2 Waters lads were taken out and shot. So like there was a lot of stuff, and then there was the burning then of the other shop across the way, where there was 3 or 4 unfortunate people burned in that. Can't think of the name of that shop. It's long gone, like the people. But they were Protestant owned. It was just what was going on to her at the time,
And Mrs. Callan was she put out, or did she just get a tip off, do you think?
Well, our furniture was saved anyway, so whether they took the furniture down from her and then tried to set the house on fire or something like that, But your man Howard, you obviously know him, do you?
I do, I know Marcus well, yeah. I've asked him about Cullen's castle. He says he doesn't really know that much about the history of it, like, other than...
Well, it's the pirate born, like, that built the place, like, I suppose, like, that's well chronicled, I think, about him. And, but for us, like, it's the spirits at home of Cullen, and that's it, you know,
yeah.
Us growing up.
And it was on Tahirpole McShawn then, really, that...
Well, you know, I suppose, as I always say, we talk about the FFFs and all the rest of it, but I would always say that Falma, it was a Falma Gaeltacht from 1958 to 1964 that he went away, everything was Osculga. The Bohan, the Shomri, the Puckfada, all the saints in the Horan, you know, if it was a 70, it was a Shachtu. If you looked at the newspaper cuttings at the time with regard any the reports in the games, your name was always in fucking Irish. You know, if you scored a goal or two, there'd be reports in the game, but everything was Osculga, absolutely everything. And like when the first camp we went to Connemara, an Irish speaking place, so like it was definitely the Falma Gaeltacht from 1958 to 64, like in his period. Everything in like as I say, it's the Bounchuk, Osculga, the Shukbahan, the Showmarie, the names of the team, Caedmon in it, Darriman in it. Everything, it was Osculga in every sense of the word. But funny enough, the only time we would see Father McShawn up at Cullen's castle, and this was a bugbear where a lot of us at the time, was not mad for chasing us going, you know, when we were teenagers and that, stalking out with the girls and that, you had this fucking thing of chasing you home up the back of the wall if you were going out with one of the local girls, and he had this mad thing that he thought he could go up and chase us off the castle. He did do it on a few occasions, believe it or not. And like, I wouldn't be talking ill of that man, there was no doubt about it, he's a wonderful man, and you probably heard plenty from your own family there. And we are all immersed in what he done and all the rest of it. But funny enough, I was down at his graveside, he's buried down in Ballymcnab there last year. And it was a reporter that asked me, he was trying to do a story on him, and he wanted me, you know, just asked me about his stuff. And I said, right, I'll go down and get photographs of the grave and all that, send them all on to him. I want to do something about him in Croke Park. When I was standing at the grave, he was talking to this man about it, and he said he done something similar there. He was very much into, but it was on a different. It wasn't hurling. It was sports, water sports. Believe it or not, he built this big. It was a massive place he built across the way. But anyway, we were talking about it, and he said, "Well, the only one problem," he says, "we had with him around here," he says, he used to always chase the boys and the girls away if they were down there. You know, and the clergy had that fucking thing in their head, you know, courting couples like youngsters. Because I remember another period where Terry Coburn's 18th birthday, and I know we were playing a hurling match the next day, in big enough matches, but minor game, and he came into the house. And kind of half spread up the party now. Like, he what brought him in there, you know, he'd chase us home. And we were 17 or 18 at that time, like.
So on one hand he's teaching you about Cullen, who was an awful scoundrel and womanizer, and on the other hand he's expecting you not to be him.
I don't know, like, I mean, but the clergy was a wee bit inclined to be like that at that time, weren't they? You know, like, they had a complete control on your life.
It was very repressive, like, it's complete cult situation, like, we wouldn't be into it at all now.
I just remember going into confession one day to him, and he says to me, "Make sure you're down for your match early tomorrow." Jesus. Like, to myself, Jesus, stop. Yeah. And
was it him that told you the stories about Cullen when he was starting Naomh Manana, or
well,
did you know about Cullen from school, or?
Oh, with the Red Branch nights and all that, it all comes into that area, doesn't it? Setanta and well, we certainly would have got to know more about it, like with the puck fada, you know, the young Setanta pucking the ball from Dundalk and Ardwalker, like, you know, and it sometimes irks me when there was a guy one night on a podcast somewhere I listened to it. He was on about the standards of hurling and football in Loud, and this guy was asked about Loud hurling, and of course we are immersed in it, my family, like, and all that with Damien and the fact we played for Loud for all the Callans and all that. But I could have kicked the thing off the wall. He says, the usual. I should only hurley out what we had was Chulainn. And this was a well-known journalist, can't think of the guy's name. And I says to myself, well, good man now. Just goes to show what you fucking know about culture. And Chulainn was never the hurler. Setanta was the hurler. And I just can't think, you know. And I remember saying it to Joe Carroll. Met Joe, Joe wrote GA in the Democrat. And I was saying, listen to that so and so. Oh, I know what you're going to say. And he said when he was asked about her, yes, and I said, Joe, that's all who's ever said. The only holder ever came out loud was Chulainn. I have to say, that chap would want to go and get a history lesson. Chulainn was a worry, he wasn't a hurler.
Yeah, well, you're right there. I was up with Anthony Murphy last night, and he was, he stated it as bluntly as saying that Setanta and Chulainn, two different people altogether. Like, not in the literal sense, but you're talking about two completely different personalities, completely different individuals there, like, do you know.
Did you see the little book that's done in the August this week?
No.
But how Callan got his name.
Oh, no.
We book, it's a lovely little thing now, yeah. It was given free in the August this week.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and you see the young Setanta playing the hurling and the dog and all that, you know. Yeah, it's worth getting your hands on it now. You're just doing stuff on it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it is very good.
So did you know when you were a kid, and as you say, you were defending the mount, you were defending Chulainn's castle, did you know, would your knowledge of myth that you'd been taught at that age have extended to telling you that the mount was where it's thought that Chulainn stood off against each one of Queen Maeve's warriors whenever our army made it up this far?
Yeah,
would you have known that was the same place?
We would have. With the stone for us that's in the field beside it, and it's even to this day when I take my grandkids up there, I'd say that's the stone. But the only thing is now with my grandkids to say, Granda, that stone they live in Knockbridge is only up the road from us. Which stone is it? You know, the one that's in Knockbridge. And like when I took them up when they were kids and that, I would say, now that's the stone where, you know, Chulainn was tied to the, you know, and all of that sort of stuff. But to us, it all happened there. It was always about the castle. It was, you know, and as I say, when we had that extra bit of pride when we knew a wee bit more, the fact that we were actually doing what this guy done, you know, pucked the ball from Dundalk into Ardwalker, that was his home, that was his place. We actually have a stone now. There's two stones up at the start of the puck fada. There was taken from Castletown Mount in 1988. Photographs of it there at home. And there's a stone from Navan Fort in Armagh. That was supposed to be the home of Conor McNassa, his uncle, where he would be going. So there's a stone from there and a stone from Castletown Mount up there at the puck fada. Now the priest got an inscription done on it, but it's very poor now at the minute. It's very bad. It needs to be redone. But it's never highlighted or anything like that. An awful lot of people don't know about it. There was one year we got it into one of the programs, but the inscription is very poor on it, like, you know. But funny, Jerry Adams was up there one time, and God rest him, Paul Ward, who died there last year. He was a great pug father lad. He would have painted all the stones that's up there and that, and but Wardy would be mad into all of that, and Jerry Adams wanted to know a wee bit about it, but sure, Wardy was over. It was the two stones and pucking the ball from Dundalk and Ardwaka and up to the fort of Connacht Ness and that. He had it all off, like, you know. It sounded great, like, you know. Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, Jerry Adams that day had his dog running about. Wardy says to Jerry Adams, you know, you shouldn't have your dogs up here. And the next thing, one of the security men, he's not up, sort of, you know, you don't be talking to Jerry like that, like, you know.
Well, Jerry shouldn't have been bringing his dog up the mountain. That was a bad act.
Well, I mean, like, it was always great. Like, I mean, God, for us youngsters, like, you know, when you went to the farm, like, we were so lucky, as you know, and like, we, you know, we were beside, like the mount would have been the number one activity area for us, like, you know, and of course you probably heard your own people talking about scrapsies and down at top of Roan and down Bridge of Crin. And then as we got on a wee bit too, we used to go out to Roach Castle, but it didn't hold the same thing for us. It was much bigger, and it just didn't seem to have. It was great on the cycle to go out to it, and wow when you saw it, but you had a much different outlook on Roach Castle than what you had on the Culholland's Castle. Now, we did spend a good bit of time out there when we got, you know, some of us had out crocs and bikes, and it was great to get out there and spend an afternoon, which we often did, but it didn't hold the same. It wasn't the same, and it didn't have the big moat like that you had in up at the castle. Like, and for different reasons, we probably have better memories of. You wouldn't have a date regard out in Roach Castle, like, you know, but you would have a Culholland's Castle. Yeah.
There's no better spot for curtain. I'm sure Culholland would have approved.
Yeah, well, as I said, there was many's a match made up there, I can tell you, up at the castle. Yeah, as I say, we went up there as boys, we went there as teenagers to learn a few things, and we went up as adults just to get our heads set right for something that we maybe have to get on with, exams or doing something, or get married even. I always found it a place that I could always clear my head in, you know. I did, I often spent a bit of time up there. I got a drone there, the first drone I got, I remember, I probably may have lost the first one up there. I went up there and then of course again, the other fascination for us too, we'd take the shortcut through the Castleton graveyard, the old graveyard there, and that was full of, oh my God. Like in the late 50s, early 60s, you couldn't have gone through there. Like, that was complete wilderness. Like, all my father's people now are buried there, and we are very lucky that the names of the whole lot of them are on it and all that. There's a big stone there. In fact, I suppose there were undertakers that could get it done, but that was an interesting trip, like going up through there, up through the cemetery, and going up to the castle. That had its own magic too, like, you know, like you'd be well afraid going through it, like, and there was like they're big tombs, you know. You're up there, I suppose, a good few times, and you know the layout of it. But back then, that place was totally overgrown. Like, there'd be little paths through it, all right, that you could. Like, we'd get over down at the gate there, get up over the wall and into it, and well, not really either there. It was more if I remember rightly now, we'd have to get in further up, nearly up at the convent, get up onto the wall and go through it. But for us, basically, the run was to, again, there was an old mill there on the mill road, Bulmer Lennon's. Now, for us, the park lads, we'd go over to the pumping station, into Shields' Field, over Duffy's Field, over to Bulmer Lennon's, play around there, because that was an old mill. There was plenty of adventure to be had in there, and then up the road to the castle. That's right. We spent our time. And then we'd have maybe faction fights with some of the crowd, the townies as we called them. That happened up there, but not always that often. But we always thought, like, if any bit of a squabble happened up there, like, we'd be getting involved, like, you know.
So it really was your turf to defend, like.
Well, I remember actually, my own brother, who were older fellas, Only Mulholland, Bradby Patsy's older brother. You know the Mulhollands, the Porrick Mulhollands, his father's people, and Matty Dullahan. They were older lads. I remember we were in a bit of a scramble one time up there with a crowd of lads, as we call them, townies now. We thought we were in the country, and we'd like to think we were. We weren't townies. But I remembered we were in a bit of a scramble one day with some gang from up in and around the town anyway. But them boys appeared in the scene, the bigger boys, the bigger brothers, and they settled it, like, you know. So it was always sort of that sort of a situation up there. Yeah, there's good times in it, all right, no doubt about it. And
great stories. You've probably told us everything you know about Mrs. Callan now, have you?
Well, Mrs. Callan, I would say, yes, she's a very interesting woman. I'm delighted now that on her grave, it is recorded, you know, that there was I actually wouldn't have known where her grave was until now. You can go out and you'd see the flag that honours Mrs. Callan's son. Like,
which graveyard is it?
In Orney Cemetery there. It's out at Dungooley.
Right.
It's well worth a visit to go to see it. It's the poet Peter O'Donnell, and he's supposed to be buried there. It's an ancient graveyard, like. It's a beautiful. You talk about a country graveyard, like it is. It's a beautiful place to go, and it's particularly well kept. Now, it's not easy to find. You have to go down a wee laneway that would possibly you'd be crossing maybe 2 to 3 fields. You know, a laneway like that would be going right down.
Okay.
But it's well worth a visit out there. It really is.
And is Mrs. Callan buried there with both of her sons?
Well, the only son that she had was Patrick.
Oh, that was her only son, right? Sorry.
Yeah. Her husband was a Kerryman. I was looking at her marriage certificate today, actually. What year was she married? Just looking at Irish Genealogy. It'll give you that's a great site to go in there to get birth, marriages and deaths. Hers came up now fairly quickly. But yeah, I suppose it's amazing when you think about something in your youth, when you're a place that you loved and you played and around and you had your own magical thoughts on it, and when an elderly lady that, you know, was well in her 80s at the time would be telling you she lived there, you know, you'd have to, you wouldn't be, you know, it would definitely, it didn't add up. But it was amazing, like when I did, like years on, and I did discover that it was Mrs. Callan. And like Tom Gernon now could tell you a fair bit now. Do you know Tom? Like you'd know
yeah.
Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom would have a good take on the castle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I spoke to Tom a few times. When I first saw Tom's posting, I thought it kind of brought me then to Mrs. Callan, you know. And then it was funny enough, was I was telling Tom about Mrs. Callan, And then I posted up a couple of things about her in the early days of Dundalk North then. And the fascinating thing for me basically was when I discovered then that Patrick Callan's cousins, 2 cousins, died in the First World War. Around the time that he was, well, the first fellow, Thomas, he died in 1916, and the other chap died in 1918. But they were first cousins, like, definitely.
So the cousins were way trying to compensate for Britain's, what does it call it, Britain's downfall or Britain's weakness, while Patrick was here taking advantage of it.
But at the same time, whereas my aunties never told me about the Garlands, they also never told me about Mrs. Culhan's son and his, dilemma at the same time, But then again, they were very holy people in that. They didn't think that wars and all of that stuff would be the thing to be telling me.
Well, they probably didn't want you developing Republican sensibilities and going off to fight for the IRA and becoming a warrior like Chulainn, I suppose. Like, it's, people seem to fall into 2 camps with all of that, like, and there was very big anti-myth sentiment in particularly a lot of the Christian brothers. I've heard back from people, they'll be I don't want to say harassing me on Facebook, but to be getting on and leaving negative comments, and they genuinely believe what they're saying, that myths aren't real. And I get where they're coming from in that you shouldn't take it that, Satanta or Chulainn, as we hear about him, or Lou, or real flesh and blood people walking the earth. Well, we don't know if, their stories was based on someone who was, and, not taking into account how important myths are to, mankind as a whole, and our psyche, and the place that they take up in that, like, and when you actually get talking to some of these people, you realise that it was their school, and it was in school they were being told not to be thinking about Chulainn and the likes of all of that, because myths aren't real. And it's the same with the IRA. Like, they had so much, they had so little support when they set out to do what they did. Most of the country thought they were troublemakers.
Absolutely.
So I think, around that, in the last century, since the founding of the state, there was, up until recent decades, a very strong sense of, we have to put our good side out. There was great concern among the early Irish politicians of the new Irish Free State about how Ireland was going to come across. Yeah. Now that to justify what had been done, that it needed to look like the country was in a good state, and that was one of the justifications given. Now looking back, she was a lecturer down in UCD, I think, in social studies or something like that. But she was saying that the Magdalen laundries were a great way to stash people, women mainly, and the industrial schools as well for boys, people who were just causing trouble, who weren't allowing their family to put the good side out and make us look like we were all fucking cookie cutter British families. Victorian sensibility, how for the first nearly 100 years of the Irish state we were trying to still be as good as the Brits in their Victorian fucking refined era,
But the Civil War was never talked about in school. Never. Nobody ever, in primary school, definitely. Now, I hadn't much education, to be honest, but the Civil War, they didn't go there. You heard, 1916, Pearson, that you were, but certainly the 1922 period Civil War and that stuff this was not talked about.
Yeah, we didn't. I think there was a very short paragraph in our history book in primary school on, and it was completely glossed over. But then we didn't learn much about 1916 either, unless you.
No, it wasn't. That's very true. You didn't either. About the actual. Yeah, but like I mean, sure, the bird, like the whole thing, like I mean, it's. Now I've a massive interest, and I done one or two talks on it. Was the printing of the proclamation, because I was in the printing trade, and it's fascinating how that was printed, how it even got to print, with the paper that had the typefaces, they had the way they had to doctor up typeface and everything else. It's that's a fabulous story, like there too, you know, and stuff like that you wouldn't have been told about either, like, you know. But Kevin would have learned a bit. There was when we went to Bolton Street in the block release in the printing. I think Kevin went to Bolton Street too. But I know we had the guy who taught us print design and that. He was an elderly man, and I was going in 1966 there in our final year, and it was 50 years of the 1916. But this guy really was into the proclamation and the printing of it. Now it is how it ever got printed it was just complete a miracle on the paper they had to use, quality of the paper, the typefaces, everything, and he pounded into us, and he went on and on and on and on about it. So when I came around, it was always in the back of my head, and I knew the story he'd say that sort of thing, you know.
Aye, well, I was going to say, what is it, June? You've 12 months to brush up on that, and I'll probably come knocking for a documentary on that, Damien. That's a good one, like, that's a bit you never think about.
How that got printed is just incredible.
The practical realities behind
that was
getting
printed in
proclamation
two halves. That was printed in two halves. Literally, they hadn't enough type, and they had to split it up.
Jesus.
And there was peas made out of, the letters were all a bit of candle grease, and the O's were C's, and everything else is incredible, absolutely incredible story that. Now I often saw one or two documentaries on it and stuff like that, and how they actually got it out. 200 copies. See, there was a copy the other day there given to one of the universities down in Cork. The Rebel County hadn't got one actually. But like, yeah, like I mean, it's. I suppose Irish history is fascinating in many ways, but the church played a huge part in the whole thing, and everything. And as far as I'm at 75 now, and like we were very lucky, I suppose, that we can't say very much against Antara, Paul McShawn, Father Hackett, great priest. Callan McGee, like, and all of those, but like the De La Salle brothers probably too played a part, like, you know, but the Christian brothers seem to be the bad boys in a sense. I don't know why it is, but yeah, like it's but thank God now it's a lot of stuff's out there now and it's open, and maybe there's stuff we should know, maybe we should know. But the Civil War is 11 months of pure madness, like when you read up on it, like, I mean, it's crazy, absolutely crazy. We done worse things to us than what the Black and Tans had done too, like, you know, when you read it. I have a book at the minute I got there from 75th birthday, actually it's that period, 21, 23. We'll start getting into it a wee bit.
Did you ask about the souterrains?
Oh God, I forgot about the souter. Did you ever? Were they open when you were there playing?
Yeah, very much so.
Oh, tell us about the souterrains, Damien.
Very much. Yeah. I was actually in the one that was got down at the end of that field there, out on the. It mightn't be a relation to the castle, but there was the one that was got down on that Grey Acre Road, where there was one there. That was in the 60s. I was down at that when they found that one. But the one up at the castle, like where you went in there, oh yeah, we haven't went down into that. Now I wasn't the bravest of the braves, I'm going to be honest, as a youngster. I really wasn't. Didn't like enclosed places or anything. But I know now the Connie Collins and the younger ones would be down through that. Now I don't have, no, honest to God, I cannot tell you how far down it went. we used to hear that it went to the Green Church, and we used to hear then it went down to Pagan's there, down at the river there. Supposed to be an escape hatch for the pirate burn that went down, you know. Well, we wouldn't have known, the pirate burn wouldn't have come into it, but it's only afterwards, you know, you'd be reading up about stuff. But there was a sort of, one found a way down at on the Grey Acre Road. There would be within an arm's throw like of the castle. Like. But I remember the gate and all on that. Like, I remember fellas being put in there and the fucking gate was pulled out, locked, pulled over. You know, we wouldn't have a lock or key, but it was pulled out. You know.
Say they lost their lives.
2 or 3 fellas that go down into it, and the smart fellas that pull the gate. Yeah, it's blocked off now. I noticed it already, she's not. But the biggest, the thing that we had going there, just exactly where that was, on the wee wall there, we had, in the branches of one of the trees, we had a rope, and we could swing from the wall right on the far bank, from the rope that was on it. And funny enough, I think, I don't know what it was, one of the Hollands or Connie Collins or one of the lads there down beside your mum's, one of them lads there actually came off the swing. You know, somebody had to climb up the tree and crawl out and tie up the ropes, which was done, like, you know. Oh, she was ahead of a job, like. She swung from the wall, the wee wall as you go up, round, going up, right up over to the far, right up onto the mound. You just swung right across it and jumped off over there, and then the thing swing back over somebody else, it'd swing back right over it, like. Huge big rope, like.
And the trees that's there must be a few hundred years old.
The only thing that annoys me when I go up there, and annoys me greatly, is, okay, the place, okay, it's not as we remember the structure. It's the wall is gone and there's stuff gone there, but it's safe, like, and all of that now. But it's dreadful. Like in our time, you could run right round the top moat and the bottom part. You could run, you know, the bottom of the moat right round it. You can't do that now. It's totally overgrown. At one part of it there that you literally can't run around it, either on the outer rim of it, or the, you know. So that's. When I go up there, when I be looking around, you'd see, I'd often say, my God. But then again, there's not as many young people playing up around there like it was in our time. So that place was packed. Like, it was an adventure centre, like, really, it was in the 60s. Then Cox's Domain was built, and St. Ronan's Terrace was built. Like, you look at the housing estates that was built. Like, Farman was sitting there from 1952 right up till, I suppose, a good few years before Ronan's Terrace was built. And then you'd had the Coxes in there, which would be big estates there. And they all found their way up there. You know, like, it always was a high of activity. When we were in Panama, the way it was, when the summer holidays came round, you were up in the morning and you were away. And your mother would say to you, don't come back here till such and such or something. And maybe the door would be locked or something like that. Good, you know. But she did, big family, didn't want you in and out all day. But we would go down up to the castle. We weren't happy going up there. We'd go down, if we were into the fishing and swimming, we went down Castleton River. We'd go out to Tabarona, or over to Bulmers, over to the mill. And for that matter, if any was at any of a crock of a bike, you were away down to the border shop, where you get the minerals and you get the sweets that you wouldn't get if you had money or anything like that. You play tricks then with the customs men, because they'd be on the road, they took butter off me mother or something like that, and you'd be mad. But what we used to do then, for a bit of development, we'd get a box, go up to Pagan's or Ignew's shop, and Mr. Ignew gave us a couple of sweet boxes and smaller boxes, and we'd put one box into the other, another box into another, and we'd wrap it up, and we'd go out the road hoping that the customs would stop us. And if they stopped us, they thought they were in getting a pound or two of butter or something like that. And we'd sit inside the road laughing at them over and they'd be opening us. But that was a common thing at that time. The bus, you know, in Fatima they had what they called the butter ladies. You ever heard of butter ladies?
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother was one of the butter ladies in our street. Now every street round the court where they had our crew. In our street you had Mrs. Dillon, Mrs. Cross, my mother, Mrs. Stafford. There were 6 of them. And they had specially made, I remember it was laying in our house for years, and they had the length of the butter, the pound of butter, all, you know, in the thing. So there'd be, maybe in my mother's dress, there would be, I suppose, to be about 6 pound of butter, 3 on this side and 3 on that side. Well, butter, you get it down there for 1 and 6 when it was 2 and 6 in the south. And they were the designated butter women in our street. So stuff like that, like you were always up to something. Like, and then of course when Father McShawn came on, then the camps. First year we went to Galway, that was 10 days in Galway. The second year was Donegal. The third year was Kerry. Fourth year it was in Wicklow. You were away, like, so like it was always something. And then like in the evenings there'd always be something going on down there. But like, it's hard to believe that we were not all that far from out of town, and yet all that we had this. You know, you had the castle, and you had the rivers, and you had the fields, and like in the street, it was the girls playing their kind of stuff. Us playing football at the pumping station. The boys round where your mum come from there, they played in the green there. So everybody had a patch. We had a pumping station. Your gang would call it the green. So everybody had their own wee bit of... And of course then as you got older, it was the back of the wall of the castle when you were curtain.
And you were taking no notice of who else you saw up there, probably.
Yeah,
and it's a tower as well, the Chulainn Castle, just when you talk about it being a hive of activity, and even now when it would have got maybe a bit quieter, but the renewed interest in it, like it used to be, they reckon it used to be the centre of Dundalk town, like that all the settlement way back would have been built around.
Oh yeah, well Castletown was the first known parish sort of thing, yeah, and there was a gate and all, like, you know, or just down the road, like, yeah, there is. If you looked at old maps and everything else, like it is. But somebody said there last year on Facebook, I think it was Jerry Duffy, came up with a mad thing. He says, "Oh, the time the trees were cut from above at the castle." And funny enough, I was in the clans there a week before last at one of the Fatima meetings, and we were in the clans top room of the clans. And Jock was there and bit of noodle and a couple of Fatima heads, and just looking out the window where I was sitting, I said, "Jesus, terror lads." You could see just top of the castle, just at the top, among the trees. And I says to Jock, "Hey Jock, how would you feel if them trees was cut down and we could just see the all of the castle?" But they cut me, it looked like the idea the trees going to be cut, you know, up there, because it's all so much part of, as it always was, you know, like you'll always get a nice view of it, just maybe at some section of it, you know, from the town, particularly there if you were filling petrol there at the Apple Green, there you'll get a lovely view of it. But I couldn't imagine it without the trees. Did you ever see the photographs that they have now at the gate for the Irish Week that they had up there in the castle?
No, I don't think so.
You never saw those? No, some lovely photographs I know, 1920 or what period I forget now.
I've seen drawings of when it was the Pirate Burns home, so I've seen what it used to look like.
Okay.
In drawing form, but I don't think I've seen anything from it from the 20s.
Well, I'm not sure now. It might even be, would it probably been earlier. they had an Irish week up there, and they had it advertised, and they had photographs they took of the maidens with the Irish wolfhounds, and
Yeah, Jesus.
and there's a big round sign at the gate of it. You never saw those pictures.
Oh.
Yeah, they're definitely on the Dundalk North End. Definitely. I saw them on there. Somebody put them up one time. The Irish Week that was going on up there at some period now.
Yeah.
Whether it was in Tom Garnon's grandfather's time when he was caretaker there. And there's photographs that Tom put up all right of the Garnon sitting on the side of it there. I remember Tom one time saying it was his people. But Mrs. Callan must have went in after, and I looked up the 1911 census, and it's Garnon that's in the, it's living in the castle. The castle actually is recorded in the 1911 and 1901 census. Owned, and then I went to see who owned it, and it was Eastwood. Eastwood owned most of everything there. That whole section. Yeah.
That's a terrible.
Particularly Hamil's house that I'd have a big interest in art.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a photograph of Hamil's house.
Yeah. Well, everyone from Fatima would all
Yeah.
remember it fondly, like, wouldn't they?
Well, not so much. Some do and some don't. Mr. Sister Room seemed to be alright. You know, the nuns weren't supposed to have been very nice at that. But my sister went.
There was nuns living in it, was it?
No, the nuns taught in it, like.
Oh,
It was when it was the
that's
school.
Right. That's right.
The school end of it. There's good history to it too. When they sold out, the Eastwoods insisted that their name still be kept, and Bellews was another that they bought it from.
Bellews.
So it's come in. There's good history to that whole. And funny enough, there's a thing there that if you're at going up to the castle, right, at the cross, at the, they call it the cross, or
Castletown Cross.
Castletown Cross, yeah. But you look over at the convent wall, you'd see where there's a hole there, there's bricked up. It was only recently there last year when I was reading up about it that it was a descendant that done a bit of history. That Eastwood was the landlord, but he didn't want people going to the house, so he had a hatch there. And that's where the hatch was, where you see the bricks. Was obviously, you know, it was rebuilt back in. But I was reading there one time and one of them descendants had done a history on him, and he said that's where they didn't want the people coming to the house if they were paying their rent and whatever squabbles they had about anything. It was always had to be at the hatch. So if you're passing it, like we passed it for years and years, and it's mad, like, you know. It was only when I read it, and every time I'm passing down that way, if I come off the motorway and I'm coming down, I'm looking over at it and I'm seeing it. But like, it's just because I read it.
Yeah.
That was the hatch for the Bellews house, like, you know, Eastwood's house, like. Yeah.
I would have passed that every day for years myself as well. Going
Yeah,
to school.
it's mad, like, yeah, it is, yeah.
Well, look, thanks a million for coming in and sharing all that with us, Damien. I'm sure.
Well, I'm glad to think, honestly, that somebody else has an interest in the fact that too, that there was in relation to Mrs. Culhan. I'm sure she was very proud of, you know, and the address that's given out on the wee plaque, actually, where the garrison gives the address of Castletown Mount, formerly of Castletown Mount. So